All right, let's get started with this next session. So appreciate y'all being here. Supporting startups and venture growth companies in Kansas City. One of the trends that we've seen recently, and I think it's been somewhat exacerbated, I will say, by the pandemic, because there was a lot of issues related to global supply chain, the global markets, that impacted even startups that were only focused on the local market because they sourced supplies and how they sourced products and so on. So as we've been trying to, I would say, work with the startup community or work with businesses to understand what resources are available to them, to understand how to navigate some of these problems, I was surprised how many people didn't know about the organization that we have here today and the work that they're doing. And I don't think that's a testament to what you guys are doing. What we want to do is help kind of raise awareness of those things. So I think one of the ways we can do that is bring them here and let's talk about the work they're doing and talk about the focus they have. So with that, I wanted to invite Melissa to come talk about the work they're doing with the chamber and the work that she's been leading with this organization. I'm going to just have you introduce yourself a little bit, maybe give a little background, and then we can jump straight into the presentation.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to be here. Thank you. And yes, World Trade Center Kansas City is a little not well known, unfortunately. And again, it's like you said, it's not that we're not out there doing great things. It's not the great work. I think it's it's not just us. It's U.S. Commercial Service. It's some of the other trade service providers that not a lot of people do research on that. I feel like we're kind of a latent thought for a lot of businesses until they actually need us. But my name is Melissa Miller. I'm the director for World Trade Center Kansas City. I am not native to Kansas City. I'm actually from rural Missouri, from a small town of less than 600 people. So there's more cows than people there. Thought I was going to be a veterinarian when I grew up. Obviously not. You do not want me looking after any of your animals. But I can tell you a few good veterinarians if you need recommendations. But I went to school, got my ag business degree, went for an MBA in business management, spent a few years during the Great Recession kind of bouncing around from jobs, trying to find something. I think a lot of people had just graduated and was like, okay, the job market's super tight. What do I do? Ended up in data analysis for 5 years before I finally got into my degree field, worked for Missouri Department of Agriculture for 3 years as an international trade specialist before this job came open at World Trade Center Kansas City. And I've been here for almost 7 years now, which is fantastic. I love Kansas City, love the community, love the businesses that I get to work with. So it's a fascinating time just to be in Kansas City in general. So love my work, love my job, have no intentions of moving. So you can tell the chamber that.
Awesome. We'll report back
right.
For sure.
But World Trade Center Kansas City. So again, as you said, not a lot of people know that we have a World Trade Center in Kansas City. Most people are familiar with the Twin Towers in New York. For better or for worse, that's the one they tend to associate the World Trade Centers with. But there are actually over 300 World Trade Centers in 90 markets around the world. We're considered the largest global trade network. Here in Kansas City, the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce holds our license. They've held our license since 1990. We're one of the older WTC licenses in the world. And then our mission is to facilitate international trade in Kansas City by connecting, educating, providing services to the regional business community. So who do we serve? Because the chamber does hold our license, they dictate our primary territory. So that's 14 counties across the bi-state region, or what you would collectively know as the Kansas City Metro Statistical Area. But as a World Trade Center, we have a larger secondary territory. So the next nearest World Trade Center to us is Rogers, Arkansas, to the south. They do not go outside of the state of Arkansas. So I've got everybody from Kansas City down to the Arkansas-Missouri border. To the east of us is St. Louis. They work with us, and we kind of split the state of Missouri in half. So Columbia, Missouri is kind of our demarcation point. To the west of us is Denver. They don't go outside of the state of Colorado. So I've got everybody to the Kansas-Colorado border.
Oh, wow.
And then there is nobody to the north of us except for Winnipeg, Manitoba in Canada. So I have everybody from here to the Canadian border.
Seriously?
Yes.
Wow, okay.
That does not mean I'm actively out there canvassing those territories because I'm only one person. I just don't have that much time on my hands. But if a company is directed to us from one of those states, I can help them out with any of their international trade needs. Small, medium, large, don't care what stage you're at in your company's life cycle. All industries, we are industry agnostic, so we can help anybody with any industry. If I don't know it, we will deep dive into your industry to find you the resources that you need. We help with import and export, and that's something that really differentiates us from some of the other trade service providers in the area. So like U.S. Commercial Service, the SBDCs or Small Business Development Centers, they can solely help with exporting. They cannot help with importation needs. And as you mentioned, with COVID, supply chain issues, that has really come into play. And that's a niche that we've been able to really fill and kind of lean into with COVID. We had a lot of companies who were like, I have suppliers in China, elsewhere in Asia, and it's costing me triple to get it over here now. I can't pay those. What can I do in the meantime? And we've been able to, help them source other suppliers from like Canada, Mexico, that are a little closer to home and a little bit easier on the pocketbook. And then chamber and non-chamber members, I do like to point this out, that even though our license is held by the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, you do not need to be a chamber member to gain access to any of our resources and services. We didn't want that to be a barrier to the community at large gaining access to our services. We didn't want it to be an impediment to them achieving their international trade goals, whatever that may be. So I do like to point that out. And then this is just a brief overview of our services that we provide. So we do market and industry briefings. So that's where we'll bring in foreign dignitaries from time to time to talk about their markets, what opportunities they have, what they really see trends are happening, upcoming opportunities, things like that. We will have the Japan External Trade Organization, or JETRO, next week in town. And I can send you that information if you want to pass it out to the group.
Yeah, so that was on your website. So when you bring these foreign dignitaries in town, or you bring these experts in town, these things will show up on the website and people have the opportunity to attend?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. We unless it's otherwise stated, we generally open these up to the public. Any company, again, you don't have to be a chamber member to be able to sign up for these events. We do have a newsletter that goes out once a month. We try not to flood any inboxes, and anything that we have upcoming will be on that list. But yeah, they're going to come in. They're going to talk about what doing in business in Japan is like, kind of tips, tricks, things like that you need to know. And it's a really great opportunity to, one, learn more about the market, but two, get a direct connection within that market. So if, you may not need them now, but later on down the line when you're like, what, I was thinking about Japan, I'd really like to connect with this person. You've got an in already. Trade education events, we hold those throughout the year. So, check out our calendars, newsletters, things like that. And that's everything from, we've had lawyers come in to talk about what is IP, what is international intellectual property considerations? What are those things? What are things that I need to consider when I'm taking my business overseas? We've had them come in and talk about hiring foreign employees. What does that look like? If I'm hiring a salesperson in another foreign market, what are the tax implications on that? So it's a wide range of trade education events. We hold them throughout the year, cover a variety of topics. Our export concierge, that is just a fancy word for business consultation. So I sit down with the company, we assess where they are in the international trade process, where they want to be in the international trade process, and how we can help get them there. So any resources that we can provide to them, any connections that we can make for them, etc.
So is that helping them identify maybe the blind spots as well? Like the things they might not be thinking about, you could prompt them as they're going through what they're trying to accomplish.
Yes.
Like these are things you probably need to look out for, or you need to have more support with, those types of issues. Yeah, no, exactly. We get a lot of companies who come to us with two primary questions. It's always the first two. How do I get paid? And how do I get my product from point A to point B? Which are great questions. Those are always great questions. I would always add, keep me out of jail. How do you keep me out of jail? Would be the third one I would always want to ask. Yeah. What regulations do I need to know about when I'm going overseas? But a lot of times they forget about, sometimes it's the intellectual property. They forget about portions of the brand that they need to cover when they're going overseas. Or we find a lot is the taxation that they forget about. And it's not just foreign taxing, it's domestic taxing as well, because it's a whole nother class code.
it's a lot. So you can have a whole nother segment on that. But yeah, so we talk about some of the blind spots that they might have as well.
Got it.
Market research, I do like to caveat this. We do not do in-depth market research. If you need that, we typically send you to the SBDCs, the Small Business Development Centers. UMKC has one. Johnson County Community College has one on the Kansas side. But either them or U.S. Commercial Service, they do a fantastic job of it. Way better. Again, I'm just one person. So market research alone would keep me busy for so long. But what we do is what I call supplemental market research. So if a business is looking at a particular market and they need just a list of potential suppliers, distributors, et cetera, in that market, we can pull that. But when you talked about, the regulations keeping you out of jail,
Yep.
We do have access to a database that, as long as we have a classification code for your product, we can input that in the market that you're selling to, and it'll pull an entire list of regulations that you need to follow, like a step-by-step process. So we consider that supplemental market research, but still things you need to know when doing business overseas. SCERT is our online platform where we process certificates of origin on behalf of the chamber. It's a fancy export document that says, to the best of our knowledge, this product was produced where the company says it was produced in. Some foreign customs agencies do require that for some products, which gets a little tricky, but it's a service that we've provided. And again, during COVID, because this was completely online, we were able to keep this open and keep shipments moving out of Kansas City, which was fantastic. Global Business Liaison. This is where we leverage those 300 plus World Trade Centers around the world. And what I tell my clients is sky's the limit on what we can ask them. It's everything from, hey, I had a company reach out to me. I don't know if they're legit or not. Can you check into them for me? And I have literally sent some of my colleagues down to these business addresses to check them out.
Like make sure they're there. Yeah. Like ring the doorbell.
Yeah. Like, I mean, they have a website, but we don't know if they're like physically there, and we've had a couple of them come back and they're like, no, these aren't real people. I
have an image of this as like a big Slack group that you're all in, and you like throw stuff in and be like, hey, can anybody help with this? And like somebody raises their hand, and says yes, or
pretty much. It's called a reciprocity desk.
Okay.
So I just send stuff out. Here lately, it's been, hey, I've got a company who's looking for a supplier in your market. Do you have anybody in your market that would fit this? So it's a lot of matchmaking that we do. But it goes so much more than that. And this Global Business Liaison is one way that we can also help domestically as well. And I know World Trade, everybody immediately goes international, which they should, as they should. But we do help domestically as well. Because as I mentioned earlier, I do have counterparts across the United States.
Sure.
If you've ever been to a convention in Las Vegas, you have been in our WTC Las Vegas partner.
Oh, wow.
Location. Yes. So
it's the convention center.
WTC Las Vegas runs their convention center. I have no plans to run our KC convention center.
Yeah, no.
But yeah, so they run their conference and convention center. They've offered in the past special packages for any of our clients who are attending conferences and conventions at their venue. WTC Atlanta has reached out with RFPs, so proposals that they have. They had one for the Hartsfield-Jackson Airport and said, hey, do you have any vendors in your area who would fit this profile? And we've been able to send them counterparts. But even helping some of our clients who are just looking to open another office, like in Denver, I can talk to my counterparts over there and go like, hey, I have a client who they're just looking to open a satellite office in Denver. Can you help them? And, they're going to know their chambers. They're going to know their economic development folks. They're going to know the same people that I know in their market. And we're able to make those connections happen.
So how does somebody know that you guys have received an RFP from WTC Atlanta or knowledge that one exists or that kind of thing? Is it published? Is it is it part of the newsletter that goes out to your clients, or is it more of a curated, who your clients are and you can go like hand select them?
Right. Yeah, we do. So just to keep a little bit of control over that, just so we know who we're
Sure.
Sending out to anybody who asks for an RFP. We don't make it public. We do have a curated list.
Okay.
But a lot of times too, I'll know a lot of the industry organizations and like, okay, hey, there's nobody on my direct curated list, but if you've got somebody in your membership list that you know is a real person, that is a really, legit company that you would recommend that this client reach out to, we'll do that as well. So if I'll go through my curated list first, if they're not there, then I go out to like the general.
So I guess the key to that is like get to know you.
Yes.
Like share the business with you, share what they're looking for, maybe go through the concierge service first. So then these opportunities also, because now they're known.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Heartland Export Accelerator, I've got slides on this
Perfect.
after this because it's
one of the things I had questions about.
Yes, it's new. But really quickly, these last three. So we are an Ex-Im Bank REPP, which is the Export-Import Bank of the United States. We're their regional export promotion partner. I live in alphabet soup all day long. We are the World Bank PSLO, which is Private Sector Liaison Officer. And we are the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, or USTDA, Making Global Local, or MGL partner. Those are, again, just all a bunch of alphabet soup to say that we serve as a liaison between Kansas City businesses and those three organizations. So if you ever have to deal with one of them, if you ever need to reach out to one of them, we are here to serve as that connector between the two. Or if you're already working with them and you're having trouble getting a hold of them, that's where I step in and go, hey, I need you to reach out to our business members. Very, very rarely does that ever happen, but it has happened. But Heartland Export Accelerator, so this is brand new. We started this in fall of 2022 with our first cohort. The spring 2023 cohort is just wrapping up. They are going to be submitting their export plans May 26th. So the end of this month, they'll go through a graduation event, and then we're going to have a public showcase, but I'll get to that in a minute. But the premise of this was companies will participate in global trade education sessions led by subject matter experts while simultaneously building out a strategic customized export plan. So we send 2 companies through the program. It's done completely virtual, and we do this for a couple of reasons. One, it's to keep costs low on our end. So virtual is just a lower cost for us, which we can translate that to the businesses who are going through the program. So it's we've been able to keep this down to $495 per company going through the program, which is fantastic because a lot of the times we've seen counterpart programs go for like $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 and upwards. It's 8 weeks, done again, all virtually. And the other reason that we wanted to do this virtually is it allows us to get to some of the companies who are not in the downtown Kansas City corridor, who can't make in-person meetings all the time. One of our first cohort members was from Manhattan, Kansas.
I was going to say, with your footprint, it could be a problem when you've got a Goodland, Kansas company. That,
right. Yeah. And we've actually got somebody going through the program now who's from St. Louis. Right.
Now, wait a minute. They have one.
Don't
all right.
Louis. No.
Well, we're good with that.
Yeah. They don't have an export accelerator, so they said it was cool that we took that St. Louis company. But no. So it's done virtually, 8 weeks. And then, so you go through it. It's a customized export plan. At the end of it, you get, I think I have it on here. Let's see how many. There we go. So by the time you leave the program, you leave with essential contacts and resources. So everybody that we're bringing in is a subject matter expert and a piece of an export plan. So those international lawyers that you need to know, the international tax people that you need to know, the finance people, the supply chain people, anybody that you need to know to build out an export plan and to do business internationally.
And are these primarily local resources?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Intimate knowledge of global trade, or at least we hope so, if you've been paying attention throughout the 8-week program, you're going to leave with an intimate knowledge of global trade. Valuable peer-to-peer networking. So you're going through this program with people who are at the same stage as you. And then at the end of it, you've got a fully vetted export plan. And this is super important, especially if you're going to financial institutions and asking for capital working loans to do overseas business. If you're looking to get any capital funding and it has to do with international trade, even if it's importing, a lot of financial institutions are wanting to see, not only your business plan, but that you have an export plan or an international trade plan of some sort. If you do, that's like a gold seal, especially if you've got it reviewed and fully vetted by all of these trade subject matter experts. it fast tracks your loan approval through a lot of these financial institutions.
And is this specifically
which
like a WTC certification that they, like, I mean, is that the organization they're looking for that cert from?
It's not necessarily a WTC certification, but the fact that they can go, like
They at least have a plan. Like, yeah, I have a plan and it's got these elements in it.
right. And like, I've had somebody like Commerce Bank review this.
Yep.
Like they've already looked at it ahead of time. They gave it their seal of approval. It's good to go.
Gotcha.
So ideal participants is basically anybody. Like the more I look at this list, I'm like, it's anybody. But small businesses, especially those who have saturated their domestic market and are just looking for growth opportunities. That's kind of where scalers fall into. They're in that point where they're like, okay, I know I need to grow, but I don't know which way I need to grow. Accidental exporters, which is a thing. It does happen. We've had a company come to us and they're like, hey, we bought this other company and they have a pre-existing relationship with another company in Egypt and we don't know what to do. And we've had to walk them through that. So it happens more often than you think. New to export businesses, you're just starting from scratch. You're like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but somebody from Canada called me up and said, hey, we like your product. We'd really like to buy some stuff from you. What do I do? And then new to market businesses. So even if they've already had a couple of sales to foreign markets, but they really haven't gone at it strategically, this is a really good program for them because it does take them to a 5-10 year outlook of like, okay, here are some markets that are really good for me. Here are some ways that I can grow and do this strategically. And it's not just, taking whatever comes my way.
So when you say ideal participants, like where do you see them? So first of all, is there more demand than you have in the pipeline? So like you say you take 2 in the cohort?
Sorry. I should have explained that better. We've got 5 companies that go through a cohort and it's 2 participants per company.
Okay. I gotcha. Yeah. So 10 people, 10 but 5 companies that go through. Do you have more than 5 that apply when you do this?
Yes.
Okay. And so what kind of things do they need to already be doing this and need support? Or can they be in the ideation, like we're wanting to launch and we're trying to figure like who ideally from that perspective fits into this program?
Right. Typically we're looking for somebody who's at least established and has done at least some domestic sales at first to show that they're viable in that sense.
Yep.
We wouldn't necessarily turn somebody away who's not done any international work or would be in the startup phase. We wouldn't necessarily turn somebody away. It's just those who are a little farther down the line. And we've actually had this conversation of, because right now we're talking with the state of Kansas and the state of Missouri, because we are going to get to a point where we've got way too many people in the pipeline that, because we run 2 cohorts a year, we're not going to be able to,
can't get to everybody.
Need.
Right.
So we've talked to them, like, hey, do we do a women business cohort where it's just women-owned businesses so they get more valuable peer-to-peer networking? Do we do one that is just solely startup focused where, they're in that startup phase? Because that's a completely different program that we need to put forward for them. We've had a lot of service exporters coming to us who they don't have a product, and that's like, we don't need to talk to them about supply chain because they're not sending a physical product, like they're not shipping anything.
Right.
So those are different things that we need to deal with, and we've talked about like what does that look like? Do we add that cohort in there? So we wouldn't necessarily turn somebody away from applying, and we're if we get enough demand in a certain area, that's something that we're considering doing.
So you just said something I want to make sure I understand. Yep. So there is in your world, there is clearly a difference between physical import and export.
Yeah.
But like the import and export of knowledge as a like service.
Yeah.
Still a lot of things that might be required to be able to do that effectively, to be able to do that, following the right regulations. You still might need to hire employees in another country, those types of things.
Right.
Do you, how many people do you serve today? How many organizations do you serve today, roughly? And like, what's the mix of those that are physical, import, export versus maybe more knowledge based? Right. I'll call it.
So in our export concierge program, we have about 212 clients currently. Of those, see if I've got my numbers right. Oh Lord, I just pulled these numbers the other day. I want to say it's like 90 of them are what we would consider or sorry, not 90. 90 of them are, 90 are what we consider service exporters.
Okay.
And then the rest are a physical product
So
exporter.
over half are physical,
Right.
import export. Yep.
Yeah. They lean a little more on the product side,
Sure.
but because, I mean, especially here in Kansas City, there's so much in the tech space. There's so much in design and construct that, like the architecture firms, even the engineering firms, they might be building a project overseas, but they're sending engineers over.
Yeah, we have a lot of global companies here in Kansas City. Yeah.
Those are service exports, like how do you barcode a person? Like, you're sending a service.
I've seen it in a movie.
Right.
They can do it.
I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't, but, yeah, so those are things that we have to think about when you're talking about service exporters.
Gotcha. That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and then just lastly, so fall 2023, we will be doing recruitment soon. July 3rd or the beginning of July is when we'll start recruitment. So we'll have some info sessions throughout the month of July and August. Applications will be due August 25th, and then the cohort's going to start October 6th.
Okay.
And I think that's it. That's me.
So, yeah, I mean, I've got a range of companies in my head that I know have, and these are maybe startup or venture-backed companies because that's primarily what we deal with from an entrepreneurship perspective. But companies that have expanded to Canada, and they hired someone in Toronto, and they went to hire this person, and they got all the way to the finish line, and they were like, "Wait a minute, there's a whole bunch of stuff about hiring a person in Toronto that we had no idea was different. Benefits completely different in Canada." I assume Toronto is a place where you guys probably have, since it's a commerce center, it's the 5th largest city in North America, you probably have a World Trade Center contact in Toronto that helps out a lot of companies.
Yes.
And does that kind of work.
Yep.
So those are the kind of things you can help with. I also know, I'm thinking Blake, and with what he announced a Mexico partnership, announced a Canadian partnership where he was actually had clients, had business that he was doing. And I know he also sources a lot of stuff in terms of semiconductors and some of the hardware that they use for their product. So that's a company that has like multitude of things that they could talk to you guys about. Mm-hmm. Do you find a lot of traction in the startup community? A lot of startups or venture-backed companies that are coming to you guys for that kind of support?
Not a lot, but I will say like startups are the best. Like that's the best time to talk to me or any of the trade service providers is when you're just starting out, because it's a lot easier to think about these things and like bake them into the work that you're already doing than it is retroactively. And it's things from, as you're setting up your website, just going like, I want, if people are coming to me from Taiwan to be able to look at my website in Taiwanese, because that's where I can meet my consumer at. Or, if you're accepting PayPal, that you accept PayPal in different currencies, and you may not need to check that box like right now, but once you get to that point, it's already built in there. You don't have to retroactively go back and like overhaul your website to do something like that. And that's just one example, but it's so much easier on the front end to start thinking about these things,
Sure.
or at least building resources. And what I tell a lot of my clients, I'm like, look, you may not need me today, you may not need me tomorrow, but 5-10 years down the road, you know where I am and you know the services that I can provide.
Yeah. Do you have I'll call it, because I don't know how else to describe this. You have like a basic checklist when someone comes to you and says, hey, this is the kind of thing we're thinking about doing. Sure. Start with this list of, 10 things and let's see where you're at with those 10 things. Is that part of that concierge service? Do you have something that's a little bit maybe less, I don't want to say hands-on or, the more self-serve for them to understand what those requirements might look like?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's, we send people or we'll walk through with them. U.S. Commercial Service has one that's like, a questionnaire, like, are you ready to export? Is it perfect? No. Like, the federal government put it together. Don't tell them.
Right. We'll edit that out.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Edit, yeah, please. I do love U.S. Commercial Service. I love the federal government. They give me money to do things. But no. They, so they've got are you ready to export? What's your export readiness kind of thing? And it'll go through the basic stuff. Again, is it perfect? No. But it'll give you a good idea of maybe how far down the line you are, where, again, like you said earlier, like things you need to think about before you kind of pull the trigger or you jump straight into doing international trade.
I saw somewhere on the website, and I can't remember exactly what the stat was, but I thought it was fascinating. There's only 3 of you, and I'm trying to think of what that was. 3 World Trade Centers.
Yeah, there's only three World Trade Centers in the United States who are attached to a chamber.
To a chamber, yeah. Okay.
So where the chamber actively holds the license, it's us, Tacoma, and Charleston.
Interesting. But so then that means it's an independent entity that's in those other cities. Is that how that works structure wise?
Either an industrial park owns it, a real estate development agency owns it,
a convention center.
A convention center owns it. Depends on how they're using the brand. I should have probably mentioned that earlier. There's, we like to say no two WTCs are the same. We've got some that are solely real estate developments. So World Trade Center Taipei, completely a real estate development. It is just a branded building. It is there to entice lessees to say, I am housed in World Trade Center Taipei.
Really?
That is it. There are organizations like ours that are more on the trade services side, and I would say that is the bulk of what WTCs do. There are some like Las Vegas that run their conferences and convention centers. New Orleans is attached to their port and their industrial park, so they really lean in heavy to their port and industrial park area. They do a little bit trade services, but they're really more focused on building out what that port and the industrial park look like. We've got some that are attached to airports. So yeah, they come in a wide variety, and again, no two are really alike, but a lot of them are in the trade services side.
Yeah. So what was the genesis of this for Kansas City? What was the genesis to ensure that this came to Kansas City, or that this was with the chamber, those types of, that origin story, I guess, if you will?
Yeah. So we, again, in Kansas City, we're very fortunate that the chamber realized back in the 90s that there was a need, and international trade was going to be something that the economy for Kansas City could really benefit from, and go, okay, how do we add value to our membership? How do we add value to the community through international trade? And we're able to acquire the license and really drive forward with trade services. So we've been doing through the Global Cities Initiative. So that was an initiative started in 2012 with JP Morgan Chase and the Brookings Institute, where you could either, like a metro area could apply to be a part of the GCI, building out either an export plan, a foreign direct investment plan, or both. Kansas City actually chose to go after an export plan. World Trade Center was the lead organization on that. We still are the lead organization on that. That plan was launched in 2016. Going over what we saw Kansas City's future for the next 5 years from 2016 to 2021. We did not predict a pandemic in the middle there.
Yeah, none of us did.
But it was a plan forward of how do we grow the regional economy through international trade? What does that look like? And we, took that, ran it through. We're actually hitting our metrics way ahead. The Export Concierge was part of that. We blew past the goal that they had for that in the first 2 years. So fantastic. You could really see the appetite for it in the Kansas City community. But we've got version 2.0 that is out now of that export plan, because the chamber and the community saw a need to continue this work. So they're very committed to growing international trade and having international trade as a component to the regional economy, which is fantastic because not a lot of metro areas see that.
Yeah, I mean, as a big fan of GDP, understanding that if we're not driving money into our market, small business can't thrive, because that is small business is mostly exchanging money within a market.
Right.
So without support organizations like yours to help us generate that global opportunity to generate GDP, it would be much, much more difficult, it seems. Question. So years ago, I was doing work with what was formerly KC Next, now the KC Tech Council. The Irish delegation from Dublin came over. It was like the commerce group from Ireland came over, and their question for us was interesting. I had never thought about this. They have a tremendous amount of startups that generate out of that the university there, and with all the tech scene that they built around Dublin, they have a lot of tech startups that were happening, but they knew Ireland wasn't big enough to sustain them for growth. It just wasn't a big enough market. So the decision that they made was to start moving those companies to Silicon Valley, because the United States was the ideal market for them to be in. And they would move these companies to Silicon Valley where they would fail, because Silicon Valley wasn't a good cultural fit for those founders and for the stage of those companies. They would lose employees. Like it was like a Shark Tank, they said. So they thought a market like Kansas City that maybe has an Irish population or has like maybe a stronger cultural tie would be a better place for them. Where we stopped was I forget exactly why the project stopped, but it was the idea that they would start sending startups here. So if there was a company internationally that was looking to relocate to Kansas City, is that something that their WTC would reach out to you and maybe help them establish a foothold here? Have you ever had companies that were coming into Kansas City from from outside the United States that like reach out and say, hey, I'm trying to figure out like how to operate in this market? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So yes, we do help with companies from outside of the United States, outside of this market, who are looking to enter and be a part of that. And typically, what we do is we'll work with KC-ADC, KC Smartport,
yep,
and the other economic development agencies around.
Now, those two were original partners in WTC, right? Or they are like considered, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, we work really closely with them. So anything that's coming in that's more on that foreign direct investment, that we really loop them in. But sorry, what was the second part of your question? Have I had anybody come in?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Sorry to think about that for a minute. Yes, we've had companies come in, like, hey, we're looking to enter this market. We're looking to open a satellite office. What does that look like? And again, it's reaching out to the KC-ADCs, smart ports, if they got a particular market in area. But we try to make sure it's a good fit first. A lot of times they come to us and they've already done their research. They're like, we looked at Kansas City and like we've been out a couple of times. We really like what you guys have going on there. We've really seen a lot in the animal health industry. So, working with the KC Animal Health Corridor has been, really beneficial to us. And I think that's the last company that we had come to us that wanted to relocate to Kansas City. They were in the animal health industry.
Yeah, that makes sense with the concentration that we have of those here. What advice would you give to someone other than giving you a call or sending you an email? What advice would you give to a company that was starting to explore, should we expand internationally? Is this a good opportunity for us, like based on what you've seen over the last few years?
Yeah. I mean, one, gathering resources is obviously essential. So certainly, yes, give me a call. Do your research, do your due diligence, make sure that this is something that is beneficial to your company. Not everybody needs to export. Not everybody should export, for sure. But if this is a road that you're going to go down, make sure before you get way too financially involved, emotionally involved, that you have done your due diligence and you're like, okay, this is the path that we think is going to help grow our company. Because we've seen a lot of people just dive in head first, or they've taken an online order from somebody overseas and you're like, we didn't know that we had to do all of these regulations and things like that. So doing your due diligence at the very beginning, making sure that you've done that market research is for sure a big thing. And if you get to a point where you've built an export plan and you've gotten a little bit farther in there, what we tell everybody, I'm like, your export plan, like your business plan, is like taking your car every year to get it serviced. Like throughout the year, you're taking it in for regular maintenance. So dear God, audit your export plans, your business plans, make sure you're regularly updating them. Otherwise they're just not going to run well, because things change. I mean, obviously I keep harping on COVID, but nobody could have predicted that, or at least I hope nobody predicted it. And if they did, they should have told other people. But things happen, like the Suez Canal blockage that caused.
Yeah, but I mean, the international markets are always shifting. Things are always changing.
Right.
Yeah.
So keeping those things in mind, and that's something that I tell clients is like,
that was when the ship got turned sideways for like a week.
Oh yeah, that caused.
Oh, I remember that.
That caused.
It was just news to me, but I'm sure there was a lot of people who were really upset about it.
It caused $90 billion, billion with a B, in international
Yeah.
trade
Yeah.
disruption. They were losing $400 million an hour that
Yeah, it's
that
insane.
ship was stuck sideways. It's wild.
I think that captain got fired. I'm pretty sure he got fired.
Yeah. I'm sure his license is revoked. He's no longer allowed to captain a ship.
So I guess I should open this up and see if anybody has any questions. You can let's get Abraham a mic if we can.
Oh, by the way, thanks for being here. And, I was looking forward to this because I noticed so far you've talked about the import and export aspect of what you guys do. But my question is more on the content distribution side because I'm currently working with a bunch of distributors and we're trying to figure out how to test other markets outside of the US. And the platform itself, it is HIPAA compliant. And now we're going to different territories where they don't really care about HIPAA compliant, but we have to be. So I'm trying to figure out how not to go to jail in like other countries with doing content distribution that belongs to other people. I'm definitely going to follow up to start early, like you said earlier. But do you have any advice as what to do in this stage, and is there a process like specifically that I need to follow in order to make sure that I stay out of jail? Because I'm dealing with a lot of different people's content and mine, and distributions can be very confusing.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. And yes, we definitely don't want you going to jail.
Amen.
There are a lot of really great resources out there on markets and their regulations in specific industries. So even if you're not sending a product over there, if it's like you said, if it's an app, it's a platform, soft digital, whatever. They'll have a lot of information on any regulations that are covering that specific industry. So U.S. Commercial Service has links to country commercial guides. You can reach out to us, and if you're going into a market where we have a WTC presence, we can reach out to them. That's one of the Global Business Liaison opportunities that we can ask them and go, hey, we've got somebody who's going into this market for this specific industry. What can you tell me about the regulation requirements, those kind of things? I would also recommend at some point finding a really good international trade lawyer, or at least running it past them and going, hey, these are the markets we've identified. Here's what we're planning to go into. How can I better protect myself? And they're going to give you a lot of really great advice. And that's everything from just the regulatory side, but even getting into business contracting overseas, because a lot of people don't. It's another thing that a lot of people don't think about. They have almost an American mindset when they go into it, and with a business contract with a foreign entity, it's what currency am I getting paid in? What language is the business contract going to be drafted in? And that makes a big difference. Semantics, when you get into foreign contract drafting, it really makes the difference, because should, could, would, those mean different
The favorite
things.
legal terms start to take all new meanings.
Right.
Yeah.
So making sure that you have a really good international trade lawyer on your side is key, and we work with a lot of them, so we're happy to make recommendations. But even when I make recommendations with folks, I tell them, I'm like, go to all of my recommendations, check them out. If they work, that's great. If they're not for you, there are others out there. Make sure that whomever you're doing business with fits with your values, with the vision that you see for your company. And if they don't, move on. You do not, again, it's just like taking an international client. You do not have to take the first client that comes your way. And we've told that to companies. I'm like, look, just because somebody found you on the internet from a foreign market does not mean that they are necessarily the right buyer for you. Vet them out, make sure that they're legit. Take it if you need to and you think it's the right move for your business. But if not, walk away. Like, nobody's forcing you to go international. Nobody's forcing you to do this. Make sure that it's the right thing for you, your business, the work that you're doing. And it's the same with any of the service providers that you're working with. If they're just not working, feel free to cut ties. Like, do not get yourself so far down into a hole just because you think that's the way that you need to go.
Do you find is this shift to digital commerce, like this huge shift that we've seen from a logistics perspective and from a digital perspective, do you guys, as an organization, as a global network, do you guys have a way to share best practices or the changes in the market that you pass on then to your clients or to your members?
Yeah, I mean, we try to.
I guess every country is doing this at a different pace. Is
right.
my point.
Yeah. So U.S. Commercial Service, they keep a really good handle because they have in-market representatives so they keep their country commercial guides updated every year, and they've got the latest information on all of that. With the WTCs, if we get any even with the other trade service providers, so Hush Blackwell, if we're working with them and they've got something on the Section 301 tariffs that kept changing, anytime anything that came across our desk, we would update it in our newsletter. So we try to keep as much updated information as possible. But I will say podcasts, CSIS, the Trade Guys is a really great podcast to keep up to date on. With it's the one that I listen to the most. They're up to date on a lot of stuff that's happening in the geopolitical markets with the U.S. market as well.
The Trade Guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Rich?
So great presentation. My question kind of piggybacking off of what Kevin was saying, with everything going towards that digital side, and especially now with the exponential, growth of artificial intelligence and things like that, how are you guys leveraging innovative technology like that to make the process of trade, especially on the international side of things, but also when it comes to things like, for instance, Google just came out with its artificial intelligence for translations. So I know you spoke to something that, sometimes that can be murky water and things like that. How are you guys looking at, innovative technology like that to make the process easier on both you guys' side and also on your international clients and things like that as well?
So we try to integrate innovative technologies where we can. I will say the World Trade Centers Association is a little bureaucratic, so we do take a little bit longer to get some of these things started. And a lot of them are again, because we all take different ways, shapes, and forms. Some of us are more nimble than others in terms of bureaucracy. But where we can add innovative technologies and where we can bring those across to our clients, we try our best to do that. I'm trying to think of an example of where we've done that recently, but you're correct with AI, with like ChatGPT. Like those are things that we need to think about. It's certainly something that's being talked about within the trade community in general. Like, what do we do? How do we do that? Here recently, even blockchain and digital currency. I know when you talk Bitcoin to our financial guys, they geek out over it because they're like, oh my gosh, this is like the future. This is the way it's going. And, it's probably still going to take
one currency for everybody.
Right. Yeah. It's wild. Don't get them started.
Well, don't get him started either.
Yeah.
So
No. We don't do that.
But yeah, I mean, like to your earlier point though, some countries are ahead of the curve on things. Some are a little farther behind. So just international trade in general, it's really hard to get it on a single page. I mean, even with our export documents, it's like don't get me started on export documents. I wish there was like a single set of export documents that the entire world was like, these are the only documents we're going to use. There's not. But to that point, it's, I mean, like, we try to innovate where we can. We try to put those disruptive technologies to use to further international trade. But yeah, it's just so hard when you've got some countries who are so far ahead and then some who are so far behind. And I forget how that saying goes, but you tend to go at the pace of the slowest.
Yeah.
Of the slowest person.
Yeah, you're forced to sometimes. Yeah.
Right. So it takes a little while. We're getting there.
So I want to be respectful of the next panel we've got coming up. But so two things. One, resources. I know you guys have resources that are on the site. I saw there was like a resources section there, so folks can go to the website. What's the website where you guys are at?
Yes, it's WTC-KC.com. So.
Okay. and there's resources, ways to contact you. So that was the second question I had was, so, all right, somebody's ready to reach out. How do they get a hold of you, and how do they get in contact with the WTC-KC?
Yeah. You can find my contact information all over the website. We tried to make that easy. Or if you can scan that QR code, that will take you directly to all of my contact information.
Fantastic. Melissa, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. I think this is an important topic as we're trying to grow companies that have global reach and that are driving dollars into our economy. And I think resources like yours are extremely important. So I appreciate you spending some time with us. We'd love to have you back at some point. And then also would love to start helping you push out some of the information related to some of these foreign groups that you have in and the education that you guys are offering.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.